In this episode of the Soul Method podcast, we do have some adult language. So if you have little ones around, grab your headphones now.
Life is a winding road, no telling where it goes. Driving through days and nights, won't stop for traffic light.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Soul Method podcast. My name is Joelle Fawcett, and I am your host and the founder of the Soul Method, where our mission is to be your guide to heal from the past, be at peace in the present, and create a future you love. And welcome to season 2, episode 6 of the Soul Method podcast, titled Down the Rabbit Hole. And okay, I do need to apologize. I know that I did not release a podcast episode last week. Shit's been crazy. Shit's been just crazy, y'all, like in really good ways, but there has been so much energetic movement going on in the past week. I don't even know what happened. It feels like I've been drinking from a fire hose all week when it comes to energy, as well as kind of getting whiplash from that. So it's been interesting nonetheless. And I'll share a little bit about that in this podcast. The person who that is related to is the inspiration for this episode. And today what I want to do is take a lot of the things that we've been talking about. We've been talking about choices. We've been talking about how the universe uses change. We've been talking about responsibility. We've been talking about alignment and authenticity. And I really want to kind of bring everything together in this episode, because here's the reality, is that all of these seemingly individual pieces or like nuggets of knowledge only really work when we incorporate them as a whole into our lives. So that's what we are going to do today. And the reason this came up for me is because I've seen this happen in such real time over the past week and a half, and I had to get into it. I had to share it with you guys. So we're going to start by talking about the movie The Matrix. Now, I'm assuming since this came out in like 1999, most of you have seen this movie. And there is that epic scene in the beginning of the movie where Neo sits down with Morpheus, and Morpheus offers Neo a choice. And he holds out his hand and says, you take the blue pill, you wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Hence the title of this podcast. Now, if you've seen the movie, you know that obviously Neo takes, spoiler alert, the red pill, and that is the inciting incident for the rest of the screenplay. And The Matrix does happen to be one of those movies that has many parallels to the way real life works, particularly the parallel of red pill versus blue pill, and how we always have the choice, right? We always have the ability to say no to spirit. We always have the ability to say no to the universe. Or we have the ability to say yes. And in a movie setting, it's incredibly dramatized, right? Like there's a soundtrack, it's a dark area, Morpheus is wearing this leather coat, he has sunglasses on, right? It's, it's like dun dun dun, like this big drama thing. But the reality is that this scenario is very accurate to how choices pivot the direction of our lives in real time. When we make major life choices, the universe shifts along with us. And like I've said, I've talked about changes and shifts before. The universe uses change to enable us to grow into the people we are designed to be on this planet, to make manifest the Spirit of God that lives inside each and every single one of us. Our life choices are change or not change. Right? Red pill or blue pill. And these choices are the assignments of our lives that Spirit uses. And like I said, I've talked about this before on the podcast in relation to how to make challenging choices, as well as what the difference is between a choice or a decision that we talked about last time. And in this episode, we're really going to kind of bring it all together, and you're going to be hearing a lot of things that may sound really familiar to you if you've listened to the podcast from its inception. And we're going to be knitting all of that together and really going down the rabbit hole on this one. So let's start with the foundation, right? We have to start there. And this is what I would like to propose. I would like to propose that in the end, whatever is out there, God, universe, spirit, goddess, Jesus, Buddha, Kali, Muhammad, whatever, it doesn't matter what you call it. Okay, call it whatever. It doesn't matter. But that whatever is out there, whatever divine entity that knitted together the perfection of the universe and the perfection of this planet in regards to the way the animals, the plants, the ground, the way that these organic things work in harmony together, the way gravity works, the natural laws of nature. That if that entity put all of that together in an absolutely perfect way, that it probably has a perfect plan for your life. And we're going to go on a tangent here for a minute because you guys know me. I am blunt. But honestly, I think it takes way more faith, like 1,000 million times more faith, to believe that some big bang happened and all this perfection was like vomited out of a meteor, right? Like a big boom and all of a sudden, oh, like everything just knits together amazingly. Like, I really don't get that, and that's just me. You don't have to like it. That's okay. So I'm going to go with the belief system that Spirit has a perfect plan for the way the cosmos goes, the way it was designed, and that it has a perfect plan for your life. And another thing I'll throw out there, because sometimes, and maybe it's the psychic in me, sometimes I can hear you devil advocates out there who will ask questions about things like, oh, well, what about this? So if I'm reading your mind and the whole like belief in God thing is being thrown up into question, like, I get it. Like, do you? And this is something that I always kind of come back to, is that we as human beings cannot imagine anything that doesn't actually exist. Like, think about it. Like, try to conceptualize an animal that doesn't exist. We can't. Right? We can take parts and pieces of other animals or other creatures or dinosaurs and put them together to make something new, but we can't actually conceptualize anything brand new out of nowhere. Right? Try to think of a color that doesn't exist. Right? Like, we can imagine colors that are things of other colors being combined, but to actually think of a color that we have never witnessed before, we don't have that ability because we're human. I believe that only God or Spirit has the ability to create that way, to create from nothing, to breathe life into something brand new. And so the fact that we can have a very clear and real understanding and perception of God, of the universal spirit, of that divine energy, tells me that it's not only real, but it's living and breathing all around us. So now coming back to the foundation, and the condition of being human is that while a perfect universe is designed to unfold around us and wants to unfold our best lives from within us, we are constantly battling that desire of our egotistical will. Right? You guys know what I mean. Right? Like, the universe gives you a million signs that you shouldn't date that girl, that you shouldn't drive drunk, you shouldn't say yes to that type of job, and you do it anyway. We've all been there, right? Like, really think about what has happened over the past, like 5, 10 years. What is the same? What's different? Why? What's happened? If it's one thing that I know about spirit, is that spirit leaves clues. And often these clues are far easier to see in other people than they are in ourselves. That's why when I was going through the process of apprenticing to become a life coach, that I had to do it all on me first, because that really is the biggest battle. So think about it in the people around you first, maybe. I bet you have a friend who is always having car issues. Like, always. You have another friend who's always having issues with their kids. That friend that always has girlfriend or boyfriend issues or wife or husband issues. I bet you have a friend who can't stop drinking or get off the drugs. Or the friend that can't hold down a job. I bet you also have someone in your life who cannot seem to make it on time for anything. Like, it would kill them to actually show up on time. And if it's a pattern, that's spirit. That's spirit calling to that person to step into this space for growth and change. You probably can imagine a few times in your life when this has happened to you before too, right? And, we're human. At the end of the day, our instinctual reaction to all of that is to resist this change with everything we possibly can, right? We rationalize it. We justify our actions. We go to the, I deserve this sort of thing, right? We've all done it. That's all right. And we do this for one reason, and one reason only. It's uncomfortable. Change is uncomfortable because we are out of control, and our egos hate being out of control. Right? Always remember, always remember that spirit is in the business of strategically positioning us at the right place at the right time so that we can become the people we are designed to be. However, most often, that right place will feel like the wrong place at the wrong time. That's why it's always so dangerous to trust your emotions if you're out of alignment. In the book, I actually have it here. If you're listening on audio, you can't see it, but I'm holding it up. In the book, The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer, he is also the author of Untethered Soul, which I have quoted from on this podcast before. It's amazing. If you have not read that book, go do it. It's foundational for this work. Just get over the hump, go do it, accept it. It's all good. On this foundation that I'm creating with you guys, I really think he says it best in here. And he says, quote, "All these amazing events and countless more are being carried out by forces of life that have been around for billions of years. The very same forces of life that we are consciously pitting our will against on a daily basis. If the entire natural folding process of life can create and take care of the entire universe, is it really reasonable for us to assume that nothing good will happen unless we force it to?" Am I better off making up an alternate reality in my mind and then fighting with reality to make it be my way? Or am I better letting go of what I want and serving the same forces of reality that managed to create the entire perfection of the universe around me? So that's the question at the end of the day, right? Which are we going to choose? Because the universe will always be offering you the red pill. The red pill is leaning in to those choices and changes that spirit offers you by these situations that come up in your life. Are you going to say yes? And I'm going to be blunt with you, it's probably going to suck. Like, a part of that, you're really going to hate, you're going to regret. At some point along the way, you'll be sitting there wondering why the fuck you said yes to that. And a small part of you will know that you're exactly where you're supposed to be. These choices we make in our lives can put you in the flow of spirit or not. And when you're in the flow and you're saying yes and you're walking in that space, that is when you are walking in your authentic and your aligned self, not in your ego. This is that magic space, you guys. And we've all experienced it at one time or another. This is the place where you feel excited to wake up in the morning. This is the place where life seems to kind of magically unfold around you with grace and ease. And even if there are challenges, you have this sense of fulfillment in your heart. And this honestly is the space that you manifest out of. You can't manifest out of your ego, guys. You can't. We all want stuff. We all want things. Our ego wants junk. But we cannot manifest out of that space. We can't pull those things to us from our future into our present from the place of ego. We have to be willing to step into the challenge of growing into the space that Spirit invites us to manifest those things that are the deepest desires of our hearts. And then there's the opposite, right? The opposite is also true. When you fight against Spirit, when you're constantly pushing and resisting, you fight your alignment. And it's impossible to live an authentic and fulfilled life from that place. Right? If you think of it in the most basic terms, if there's something you really want to do, right? Like, let's say you have a goal of running a marathon and you really want that feeling of crossing the finish line. Like, and you know the people that'll be standing there and your family members will be cheering and how proud they'll be of you, and that feeling just lights you up inside and sets you on fire. And there's no way you can get there without going through the grind and the pain of training your body for 26.2 miles. Total side note, I did it once. It was not fun. Definitely worth it. So if you resist these things, these invitations from Spirit, where Spirit is calling and knocking at your door and leaving these clues that essentially say, hey, do you want to change? Hey, are you ready? Hey, are you done yet? If you're resisting that, I really want you to think about it as you are picking up that blue pill from Morpheus's hand and popping it in your mouth. Like, that is the pivotal level of this. When you take the blue pill, you're probably going to feel bored in life. Kind of like your life is Groundhog Day, like over and over again. And even if there are things in your life that are amazing and wonderful, like maybe you have the girl or the guy that everybody wants, or you have that front parking space at your job because of the position that you hold. You are that person. You're still gonna feel restless. You're gonna feel unfulfilled. And we all know that feeling when Spirit is knocking on our hearts and inviting us and pulling us forward. And we've talked about this before. As human beings, we are incredibly stubborn when it comes to this. And we've come up with lots of amazing ways in our culture to resist this pull. Right? We've come up with amazing ways to subdue it and numb it out. So we do things like drink alcohol, take drugs, get addicted to social media or shopping or work or gossip or sugar. Right? It's really easy to ignore the call on your life when you numb it out. And interestingly enough, my stepmom and aunt did hospice work for a long time. So they would be with people as they were exiting this world. And the number one regret that people had on the last weeks and days of their life here on earth in that body is that they didn't do the thing, that they played it safe, that they never stepped fully into who they knew they were designed to be. Now, often when we are constantly picking up that blue pill in the morning and swallowing it, our lives don't change very much, or at least our perception of our lives doesn't change. And honestly, you guys, this is what happened to me when I was married. When I was married to my ex-husband for nearly a decade, every day felt exactly the same. Now, on the outside, did my life look pretty good? Yeah. I mean, to start off, like I kind of hit the genetic jackpot for the fact that I was born as a white woman in America. Like, throwing it out there, not a bad foundation, okay? Grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia, not a bad house. Got married, had 2 kids, right? Did all the things, went to private school, went to college, right? So the foundation that we have on a very purely blank scale, right? It's not bad. Not bad at all. I'm sure there are people across the world who would gladly trade for that foundation, right? It's just perspective. I would say to anyone who kind of has had that foundation in America that someone across the planet would probably give their left arm for your life, right? Never forget the blessings that you have been given simply because of who you are. Without adding all the junk, okay? But before you add all the judgments about your parents and your childhood and the bullies at school and how you weren't talented enough or how you faced that rejection, right? Before we get there, okay? Because we all have shitty parts of our childhood and we hopefully will process through that. But at a purely blank scale, never forget that at some level you were born with blessings, and that there are people in this world who would very, very much like to be in your shoes. And regardless of all of that, I felt pretty empty when I was married for that decade. And to no fault of my ex-husband, and I've talked about this before, I was the one that said yes to that. Right? That was my responsibility. And Spirit offered me several opportunities and left a million clues along the way that I was not being responsible for my words. I was not being responsible for my choices or for my own emotions. I just didn't listen. And to be totally blunt, instead, I became a victim to it, which is what we do when our egos take control like that. There's a scene in the book and in the movie Eat, Pray, Love by Elizabeth Gilbert, who is Liz Gilbert. If you ever read this or see this, I love you. You're amazing. Her book called Big Magic absolutely changed my life. But in Eat, Pray, Love, there is a scene where Liz is speaking with a friend of hers at the ashram. And he says to her, you know, you've got so much going on in that head of yours. Which is, if you read this between the lines of life coaching speak, that means here, you know, your ego is out of control in your own head. Okay? You know, you've got so much going on in that head of yours that if you would just slow down and create the tiniest bit of space, the universe would rush in. The moment that I created space for the universe in my life by making the uncomfortable choice to change, I got into therapy. I got into life coaching. I started being really fucking honest with myself and with those around me and being responsible for myself and my own happiness. That is the moment that everything pivoted and my life got on the fast track to growth and discovery. My life was on repeat for nearly a decade, and now 4.5 years later, I don't even recognize the woman that I was. I could not have even imagined 4.5 years ago, I could not even have scratched the surface to think about the amount of people that I would meet, the events that I would experience, the blessings that would be bestowed on me, the assignments I would be tasked to take on. I could never have imagined all of this back then, much less how much faster my life has sped up since I got sober in March. There's a favorite quote of mine by Gilbert Keith Chesterton. He was a British philosopher, theologian, and writer at the turn of the 20th century. And he said, quote, "How much happier would you be? How much more of there would you be if the hammer of a higher God could smash your small cosmos?" Here's the reality. Our controlling and fear-based egos don't have the best plan for our lives. We cannot even begin to fathom the greatness Spirit has in store for each and every one of us. But in order to create space, we must be willing to release the ego's control and grip on our small paradigm, our all too human paradigm that really just can't create anything new. As a species, we just really aren't that fucking creative. We must be willing to listen and choose again from alignment. And those things that we might have resisted out of ego in the past, those things that scare us about ourselves, if we're willing to cast light on it, it will dissolve. So, circling back a little bit, largely why I did not release an episode last week, why I've been drinking from an energetic fire hose for the past week and a half, is because I've been on a complete roller coaster ride with a very dear friend of mine who is, like I said, absolutely the inspiration for this podcast. And ironically, quick backstory, I met him about 1.5 years ago, the same evening that Spirit shook my world with meeting Joe. And for those of you who have listened to season 1 of this podcast, you know that story. You know how I manifested that relationship, and the moment that he walked into that room, how the world pivoted and shifted. And we've been together ever since. And what I didn't talk about in that story is that I met this other person that evening. And it doesn't happen too often in my life. It happened with my best friend. But it has only happened these handful of times in my life where I meet somebody and I know that I know that I know that I know that something about our souls has connected before. That in some past life, in some experience, we've done this thing before. And when I met him that night, I felt like I had known him forever. It was a very, very weird experience. And I bet that a lot of you have experienced this before in your life in one way or another, with friends, with, it often happens with family members where, like, you'll have a niece or a cousin who has a kid, and all of a sudden it's like, I know them. I've known them forever. I've known them my whole life, right? This happens a lot. There there tends to be about 5 major souls that we reconnect with on this earth if we come back again and again. Right? And we like to play this game as human beings. I think this is so funny that we like to play this game of wondering against authentic messages from spirit. Like, we'll get such a clear message and we'll be like, did that really happen? I don't know. Like, maybe he's not really a creeper. Maybe he was just being a little awkward that night. Like, no. Right? Don't wonder against authentic messages from spirit. Don't do that. Another really clear way to think about this is the desires that spirit put in your heart, like those things that are on your heart that you've always wanted to do in your life. Right? We all know what they are. We all have them. We question them the same way. I used to do this for years. Ever since I was a young kid, I always knew that I wanted to be a writer. And so a part of that is doing this podcast. There is a writing element to it. I am also a fantasy fiction writer. And ever since I was a kid, that is absolutely 100% what I planned to do with my life. And I went through this whole process in my 20s of questioning this call on my life. Like, am I really supposed to be a writer? I don't know if I'm good enough at it. Right? We doubt all these things. And it wasn't until I heard an interview with Marie Forleo. If you don't know Marie Forleo, look her up. She's amazing. Marie, I love you. You're great. And she was talking about this whole dynamic and how this is the reality. People who aren't meant to be writers don't question whether or not they're supposed to be writers. Right? Like people who don't have the call of being an engineer on their life or an architect don't question whether or not they should be an engineer or architect. Right? I have never once even thought that I should pursue being an architect in my life because I'm not supposed to be one. Right? So those things, those messages, the things that are placed on your heart, and those feelings of connection that you have with other people in that way, that authentic way. I'm not talking about lust, okay? That's different. All right? Way different. That's ego. Okay? I'm talking about authentic connection with spirit inside you or with other people. Don't question those things. So fast forward a year and a half, this friend of mine, him and I have been finally having some of these conversations and kind of peeling the layers back on all of this. And he also recently made the choice to give up a lot of the toxic things in his life. And it has just been absolutely incredible for me to both finally really developing a really genuine friendship with him, but also witnessing all of this happen for him. This falling into alignment with the plan that Spirit has for him. And every area of his life is speeding up right now in just the most amazing ways. And I'm just grateful that I got put here to kind of watch the party happen. And I have no doubt that he is coming into the place right now where he is going to be able to manifest his absolute best life, which will be in alignment with the call that Spirit has put on his heart. So I'm not going to announce his name here or anything, but bro, you know who you are. I love you. You're awesome. And I'm just so fucking proud of you. So, coming full circle, down the rabbit hole, through the rabbit hole, pulling all of these pieces together. The choice you make to lean into spirit and take the red pill, or to take the blue pill and numb yourself out and ignore it and resist it, that is the commitment in your life. Make no mistake. Your choices are what you are committed to, period. You can say all day long that you're committed to having a clean house. If your house is a piece of shit, you're not committed to having a clean house. All right? You can say all day long that you're committed to having a clean relationship with, your spouse, your boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it is. At the end of the day, if your actions don't match up with that commitment, it's not a thing. Your choices are your actions are your commitment, and your commitments are how you show up in the world. They quite literally are who you are. And so we kind of come full circle to where we started, where the choices matter. Like, it actually matters that you ignore the call of spirit on your heart. It matters that you don't take the red pill. You might think it don't, right? You might think that it's not a big deal, or, yeah, whatever, I'll just try this relationship one more time, even though, she's spent all the money in my bank account and is not responsible for her emotions, right? I know that taking this job probably is bad because there seems to be kind of a toxic environment, but it'll be okay, right? Like, these little choices in our life that seem little or don't seem like a big deal, or we do the thing of like, oh, I can handle it, right? They matter. They matter because if you don't create space for spirit to work, it can never be made manifest through you. And there is only one you. You are the only person on this planet in this lifetime that can make manifest that thing that has been placed on your heart by God. It matters because you matter. And more often than not, we have no idea the ripple effect that our choices, our actions, our commitments have on those around us. So, as we bring this episode to a close, how are you? How are you guys doing out there? I would love to hear from you. I know we brought a lot of stuff kind of full circle here. And next week when we get into the podcast, we're going to totally go a different direction. Next week, I'm talking about creativity, and I'm so pumped about that. I could talk for a long time about that. So, but on this topic, while we kind of, like I said, bring the last few episodes full circle, putting all the puzzle pieces together, how are you? What are your thoughts? I would love to hear from you. You can hit me up at the Soul Method Facebook page, which is at the Soul Method Yoga. And soul is spelled S-O-L. So the S-O-L Method Yoga. Or you can email me. My email is joelle@thesoulmethod.com. Thank you guys so much for being here with me tonight. Until next time.